Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're plunging into, well, a truly extraordinary moment in military history. The Battle of Agincourt, 1415. When I first started reading about it, honestly, the numbers just didn't seem to add up. It feels like this historical anomaly.
It really does.
How on earth did England's King Henry V lead this small, completely exhausted, desperately outnumbered English army to win against a huge, well-equipped French force? It's like a strategic riddle, wrapped in mud and arrows.
It absolutely is a riddle. And you have to understand, by 1415, the English army was in just an incredibly precarious spot deep in France. They had been campaigning for months, relentlessly. And they weren't just fighting the French, they were battling severe sickness, dysentery mostly, within their own ranks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and suffering heavy losses. So they're essentially trapped, just desperately trying to find a route back to England.
Stuck behind enemy lines.
Completely. Powerful French armies had cut off their retreat, and they were critically low on food, on supplies, everything. Their only real hope was reaching Calais, which was England's last sort of stronghold in France.
Okay.
But just 50 kilometers south of Calais, their path gets completely blocked. At this place, Agincourt.
So confrontation was unavoidable then?
Utterly inevitable. For the English, given how starving and sick their soldiers were, battle was the only option left. Pure desperation.
Okay, so our deep dive today is all about solving this puzzle. We're going to unpack the strategy, the surprising turns, the brutal realities of this pivotal moment.
Yeah, pull out those key nuggets of knowledge.
Exactly. What did King Henry V actually do to turn what looked like a doomed retreat into one of history's most, decisive victories? Let's get into it.
All right, let's set the scene. The forces involved. You'll immediately see the scale of the challenge here. The English army, maybe 8,500 soldiers, give or take.
That sounds small for an invasion force.
It is small, especially compared to the French. So of those 8,500, about 1,500 were heavily armored infantry knights and men-at-arms. Your sort of professional soldiers for close combat.
Okay, the heavy hitters.
Right. But the absolutely crucial part, the game changer, was the other 7,000 English longbowmen.
Ah, the famous longbow.
Famous for a reason. Their rate of fire, the piercing power, it fundamentally changed medieval warfare. We're talking about hitting targets accurately from hundreds of yards away.
Incredible. And what about the French side?
Well, that's where the numbers get stark. The French army was overwhelmingly bigger. Estimates vary, but somewhere between 15,000 and maybe even 20,000 soldiers.
So 2, maybe 3 times the size of the English force.
At least, yeah. And that included a massive contingent, maybe 1,500 heavily armored knights, the elite of French nobility.
Okay, so numerically, it's a complete mismatch.
Totally. And the terrain, this becomes a huge factor.
Right, you mentioned it was near Calais. What was the ground like?
The day before the battle, torrential rain just poured down. So the ground at Agincourt turned into this thick, clinging swamp, like plow land after a storm.
Ooh, horrible.
Horrible for movement. And crucially, the battlefield itself was incredibly narrow, only about 1 square kilometer, flanked by woods.
So like a bottleneck.
Exactly, which severely restricted movement, especially, for heavily armored French soldiers trying to charge, or for their cavalry. That mud and the narrow space, they become Henry's unexpected allies.
So how did Henry use that? What was his deployment?
Well, this is where you see his strategic mind at work. On the surface, it looked simple. His armored infantry, the knights and men-at-arms in the center, and the longbowmen positioned behind them, or slightly on the flanks.
Okay, standard enough.
But the details, that's the genius. He had his archers hammer-sharpened stakes, maybe 6 feet long, into the muddy ground right in front of their positions, pointing outward.
Stakes?
To break up a cavalry charge. Imagine horses trying to gallop into a wall of sharpened points hidden in the mud. It's an impassable barrier, basically, designed specifically to counter the French knights.
Clever. Very clever.
And there's more. To really restrict the French movement and maximize the impact of his archers, he hid groups of longbowmen in the woods along the sides, the right and left flanks of this narrow field.
For a crossfire.
Precisely. Poised for a devastating surprise attack once the French were sort of channeled into the middle. It really shows how Henry was turning the very ground, the limitations, against his enemy.
So masterful use of terrain and his key asset, the longbowmen.
Absolutely.
And the French. What was their thinking? They must have seen the mud.
They saw the mud, but their overwhelming numbers gave them, a dangerous overconfidence.
Right.
Their initial strategy wasn't even to attack immediately. It was just to wait. They figured the English were starving, sick, exhausted.
They just collapse or surrender.
Pretty much. They thought time was entirely on their side. Let hunger and disease do the work. They expected an easy target.
But Henry couldn't wait, could he? You said they were desperate.
Exactly. That's the crucial point. The English had no choice but to attack. Their resources were gone. Their soldiers were literally fading away. Waiting meant death.
So he had to force the issue.
He had to. Henry knew attacking was his only chance, and he banked everything on that narrow, muddy field and his specific strategy, leveraging those longbowmen. They were his only real assets in this situation.
Okay, so the stage is set. A desperate gamble. How did the battle actually begin?
Henry, realizing he couldn't wait any longer, gave the command. His whole line actually advanced slightly to get within maximum range. Then the English longbowmen opened fire.
The first move.
Yes. And with their superior range, they initiated the attack, unleashing just a relentless storm of arrows into the French ranks who were still forming up. It must have been devastating right from the start.
How did the French react to that opening volley?
Well, they sent their own archers forward, crossbowmen mostly. But here's the problem. Their range was much shorter than the English longbows.
So they were taking fire before they could even shoot back effectively.
Exactly. They became easy targets for the English archers, a critical misstep exposing their vulnerability right away.
So the archer duel was a non-starter for the French. What then? The knights.
Then came the main French plan. The charge of the heavily armored cavalry. Thousands of knights expecting to smash through the English line.
But the mud.
It was a disaster for them. They immediately lost speed, lost momentum. You have to picture trying to charge through what was basically thick, clinging clay and maybe 50, 60 pounds of armor on horses struggling just to walk.
And nightmares.
And all the while, thousands upon thousands of English arrows are raining down. Bodkin arrows designed to pierce armor. They were cutting down horses and riders before they even got close to the English infantry.
It's relentless.
Relentless. And for those who did make it further,
The stakes.
the stakes. They hit that hidden barrier. Horses impaled, riders thrown, total chaos. It completely broke the charge.
And what did the English longbowmen do then? They couldn't keep shooting at point-blank range, surely.
No, this is another incredible part. Once their arrows were spent, or the enemy got too close, they dropped their bows. These guys were lightly armored, much more mobile in the mud than the French knights. They drew their sidearms, swords, axes, and crucially heavy mallets.
Mallets, like hammers.
Yeah, basically like large weighted hammers or clubs, and they just went in. They swarmed the trapped, floundering French knights who were often stuck in the mud or tangled with the stakes and finished them off, using the mallets to deliver crushing blows to helmets or joints.
Brutal. Close quarters, messy fighting.
Incredibly brutal. The French charge, their main weapon, was not only stopped, but turned into a death trap.
Okay, so the cavalry charge fails catastrophically.
Yeah.
What about the French infantry behind them?
They started their advance, thousands of men-at-arms pushing forward, but they faced the same nightmare conditions. The mud made any kind of organized advance almost impossible.
Just getting bogged down.
Completely bogged down, slipping, falling, packed so tightly together in that narrow space they could barely lift their arms to fight. And all the while, the English archers, maybe having regrouped slightly or firing from the flanks, are still pouring arrows into this dense mass of men.
Easy targets.
Tragically easy targets. And then the English longbowmen, having dealt with the cavalry, joined their own infantry in the melee against the struggling French foot soldiers.
So the archers became melee fighters too.
Yes, adding to the chaos. For the French, it just descended into total confusion. They were packed so tightly, bogged down in mud, under constant arrow fire, and now facing this frenzied attack from lighter, more mobile English soldiers. They couldn't maneuver, couldn't see properly, couldn't even tell friend from foe in the crush.
It sounds like less of a battle and more of a slaughter.
That's exactly what it became, a horrific slaughter. The French formation completely disintegrated into chaos.
The aftermath must have been grim. What were the final numbers?
The numbers are just staggering and really drive home the scale of the disaster for the French. Sources estimate around 6,000 French soldiers lost their lives, maybe more.
6,000. And the English?
Compared to maybe only 500 English dead, perhaps even fewer.
500.
Yeah.
That disparity it's almost unbelievable.
It truly is. It speaks volumes about the effectiveness of Henry's tactics and the devastating failure of the French approach.
Now, there's a controversial part of the aftermath, is there? The prisoners.
Yes, very controversial. Henry had taken thousands of French prisoners during the battle, but with his own army still relatively small and deep in enemy territory.
He was worried they might rebel. or be freed by a counterattack.
Exactly. He feared losing control, feared the prisoners could rearm or overwhelm his guards if the fighting restarted. So he gave the order to execute most of them.
Wow, that's ruthless.
It was ruthless, a chilling decision, seen by many then and now as violating the codes of chivalry. But from Henry's perspective, it was a grim military necessity to secure his victory and ensure his army's survival for the march back to Calais.
A brutal end to a brutal battle.
Undeniably. But Agincourt cemented Henry V's reputation as a formidable military leader and demonstrated just how devastating the English combination of longbows and disciplined infantry could be against the, perhaps outdated, French reliance on the heavy cavalry charge.
So if we boil it down, Henry V's genius here. It was about turning weakness into strength, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Taking this terrible situation, the mud, the narrow field, his exhausted army, and making it work for him. The brilliant use of the terrain, the stakes, the flanking archers.
And exploiting the French assumptions, their overconfidence, their reliance on the charge.
It resulted in this incredible, almost impossible seeming victory. He didn't just scrape a win, he utterly crushed a vastly superior force.
Indeed. And I think what's really illuminating about Agincourt, looking beyond just the military tactics, is what it tells us about planning and adaptation. It's a profound testament, really, to how meticulous planning, playing to your unique strengths in this case, the longbowmen, and crucially, adapting to adverse conditions can overcome what look like insurmountable odds.
Right. He didn't fight the battle the French wanted to fight.
Not at all. He redefined the battlefield. Henry meticulously used every single variable, the weather, the mud, the narrow ground, even the enemy's mindset to his advantage. It's a masterclass in exploiting an opponent's weaknesses, even when you're the underdog on paper.
It's not just about medieval warfare, is it? There are broader lessons there.
Definitely. It really speaks to how you can reframe a problem, find unconventional solutions, and leverage what you do have, even when it seems like you don't have much.
So a final thought maybe for you listening. Beyond the tactics, the arrows, the mud, the terrible bloodshed.
Yeah.
What does Agincourt really teach us about leadership under the most extreme pressure? And maybe about the brutal decisions that sometimes get made for survival, for victory, when absolutely everything is on the line.
Yeah.
Try and picture being Henry V in that moment.
Yeah.
Facing down that huge army, knowing your men are sick, starving. What kind of sheer audacity, what desperation does it take to not just hold the line, but to gamble everything on such a daring, aggressive plan? And win so decisively. It really makes you reflect on the raw will and the ingenuity that could define those pivotal historical moments.